Eliminate all non-essential functions, have the crew gather in common areas, and shut everything else down.
Coming up, Riker and the crew of the Titan race against time to avoid certain death as the crippled ship faces imminent destruction.
The changeling saboteur killed our transporter officer. He could look like anyone by now.
Go get the bastard.
7 of 9 scours the ship to flesh out the changeling saboteur.
I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room.
Yes, of course.
Picard finds out why Jack never reached out to him.
He was on that Borg cube, setting the world on fire!
Shaw goes ballistic on Sean Luc.
All this and more
Coming up on the Star Trek Picard edition of Energize.
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 We're jumping to warp speed with Jean-Luc Picard and the Star Trek Next Generation crew.
You're listening to Energize, a Star Trek Picard podcast, your source for in-depth analysis, colorful debate, and exciting discussions about the final adventure of Admiral Jean-Luc Picard and the Enterprise D crew. I'm your host, Anthony McLemore.
And I'm Steve Truitt.
This week, the Titan suffers through limited power and little time to save the ship.
Meanwhile, the changeling saboteur on board is on the run, and 7 of 9 is in hot pursuit.
Can Picard and Riker figure out a way to escape the nebula?
And will the Shrike keep the Titan pinned in?
Here's a warp speed recap of Star Trek Picard Episode 4, No-Win Scenario.
Our shields can't take much more of this. Pull power from other systems.
There's nothing to pull from, sir.
Massive loss of power. We're down to 9%, and the more systems we use, the faster it depletes. We're bleeding to death.
The Titan's dead in the water. We estimate about 4 hours until the ship is crushed by the gravity well.
Sean Luc, there's a pattern. This gravity well we're in. It's drawing in matter and expelling energy.
If we knew when those waves were coming, maybe we could plug into them. Get a little extra juice, and then
We could hitch a ride out of here.
Shut down everything you can. Transfer all power to the thrusters.
Transfer sequence complete, diverting last remaining power to main thrusters.
Seeing as you're the only one here with any real experience flying blind, Admiral, you have the con.
Good luck, everyone. Engage.
All right, Steve, when we left off, we found out that there's a changeling plot against the Federation, an actual changeling saboteur aboard the Titan, and which is the reason why the Shrike has been able to track the Titan into the nebula, and Riker reluctantly, dang, I don't know what happened. I know what happened yesterday. Okay, one more time and I'll be on. Here we go. Okay, when we last left off, we found out that there's a changeling plot against the Federation. There's an actual changeling saboteur aboard the Titan, which is why the Shrike has been able to track the Titan in the nebula. And Riker reluctantly took Picard's offensive battle strategy that left the Titan dead in the water, or rather in space, sinking towards a gravity well that will destroy the ship. These are looking pretty bleak.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say this is one of the few times I've ever actually started to believe they may not make it out. I mean, I knew with TNG, yeah, there's next week they're going to survive. This one really is dire. We got, it's a lot going on here.
Yeah, the way it looks, I mean, of course, obviously some people are going to make it out, but I thought that there were just going to be casualties galore.
Yeah, it's surprising to me that there weren't. But I think that was the Shrike's thing, too. This seems more like a cat playing with a mouse, not killing it, just messing with it, like the Shrike would do, the bird would do. Same thing. Everything she promised Amanda Plummer is coming true. I'm just going to pick at you.
Admiral Picard, sir, I'm sorry, but I've always wanted to ask you something about your encounter with the Hirogen. Your book just talks about the diplomatic situation, but we heard the Alpha actually hunted you.
Did you ever find out how they got to the quadrant?
Did Admiral Janeway offer any advice?
So we jump to 5 years earlier, and we find Picard alone in a bar having fish and chips.
His lunch.
Typical British fare.
Totally.
Yes. And then he's approached by a bunch of Starfleet cadets eager to hear his stories about how he escaped peril. Because clearly he's written a novel, and they're all excited. They want to know more stories beyond what he wrote in the book.
Which to me is a funny little not oxymoron, but a strange contradiction, because he writes a novel and then it's like, well, I'm not much of a storyteller. But I think that shows his cheekiness and his need to be alone, and it just keeps cementing the thing. I'm a lone wolf.
Exactly. But the biggest thing that he shares with the cadets in that moment is no matter how bleak or unwinnable the situation, as long as you and your crew remain steadfast in your dedication to one another, you're never without hope. And, I actually like that because, that reminds me of working on projects, being on jobs where, things are, I've worked on some pretty tough gigs and it seemed bleak, but what got us through were the people that surrounded me.
I agree with that. And, and if you really think about anyone who's served in the military, guys go back for second, third, fourth rounds, fourth tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places. They go back because of their buddies. They don't want to leave them alone. And it is that camaraderie that does get them through. And Picard has always been, despite being a curmudgeon now and then, has always been about hope.
Massive loss of power. We're down to 9%, and the more systems we use, the faster it depletes. We're bleeding to death.
What if we divert everything from the warp core or the impulse reactors?
Either way, we go into meltdown.
Even temporarily?
We won't have the power to reverse the process. It's a chain reaction.
What about weapons, Mura?
Already at 0, sir.
So we jump back to the Titan and things are hopeless. We find Picard alone, and this is right after he was dismissed from the bridge, and he looks dejected.
Sure, and he's looking out these very narrow windows. It's not the typical large space that we're used to. I can't tell if it's a quarters or if it's some kind of holding room, but yeah, it's bad. And while this is going on, we've got this, I don't know if you call it a ticking clock, or it's just this sense of like, listen, we're sinking. This ship is going down. And how interesting that it's the Titan and the Titanic sank. I kind of got that same feeling, like we're going down and there's no stopping it. There's just no stopping it.
Yeah, and so Riker's on the bridge, and everyone's informing him that every system is running out of power, all the way down to life support. And so it's a horrible situation, and a lot of choices are having to be made. And like you said before, it does feel like the Titanic. It feels like everyone knows that they're out of options, and all hope is lost. This ship is going down, and there's nothing we can do about it.
And yet there's this strange thing happening, some bio wave. Remember when we first were introduced to the nebula? It's like there's not only electrical signals and other things, but there's biological. And you and I commented on that maybe 2 episodes ago. Well, now it's really going to come into play.
Exactly. So we don't have an explanation, but I'm sure we will soon.
Because we saw the episode.
Yeah, exactly.
We estimate about 4 hours until the ship is crushed by the gravity well. But we'll probably have run out of life support by then. You were right before. This is the end, my friend. And if I were you, I'd take the next few hours to get to know your son.
So Riker meets with Picard.
Right.
And Picard tries to apologize, but Riker, cuts him off and surprisingly admits to Picard that he was right about Picard's assumption that his hesitation has to do with the loss of his son. Which
I get, right? And I didn't understand it until now. That's why Riker listened to Picard and turned around and attacked, because he's like, in my heart, I know he's right, but I'm the captain. What do I do? Shoot. Jean Luc is right. Let's go attack. And then it turns out that Picard was wrong strategically. But we didn't get that admission from Picard. We just got Riker coming in hat in hand saying, hey, man, and then he explains it. It's a beautiful moment how he explains what has been troubling him, the loss of his son. And he's like, look, we've been all over the galaxy together, and we have never really found out what's beyond our own mortality. It was a great moment for the actor, Jonathan Frakes, as well as his character, I think, because I think he played it great.
Yep, and it was a good explanation for why he was so eager to help Picard and leave his family. And I'm sure that once Deanna Troi comes into the picture, we'll get even more context.
Yeah.
But Riker concedes that he tells Picard, he concedes, this is the end. Get your affairs in order, Picard. Go spend time with your son. 'Cause this is the end. I mean, this is the Titanic feeling all over again when everybody in James Cameron's picture, everybody knows.
And but the band still plays, right? So I want to remember that, put a pin in that, because there is an analogy or an allegory to that within this show, and I'll explain that in a second.
All right.
The changeling saboteur killed our transporter officer, Ensign Foster. He could look like anyone by now.
We have got to keep this quiet.
So next, 7 of 9. I love 7 of 9. I've always been a big fan, and I think that her character just continues to grow in stature. And so she's such a badass. And so she searches the crew quarters of the changeling officer.
Yeah.
And she finds the real crewman that the changeling killed and assumed the identity. Yeah, Ensign Foster.
Yeah, so and he's obviously dead, which confirms Jack's earlier report. There is a changeling on board, but I just think seeing him there, I got a chill up my spine in that moment. Like, I kind of was in her shoes, like, oh my God, this is really real. I gotta find this guy, and it could be anyone.
Exactly. And so it does parallel Battlestar Galactica because changelings are the worst kind of enemy. They can be anyone. And like in the modern version of the 2000s Battlestar Galactica, they had Cylons that weren't robots. They looked like us.
Sure.
And so I was just like, wow, this is perfect. It feels very much the same. And so that's a terrifying prospect that the person next to you could be a changeling.
Which is also a great way to write the episode early, because now for the rest of the episode, we're going to wonder who the hell is it. And that's a great way to keep us engaged, so to speak.
Exactly. It's thrilling. It's very, very thrilling.
Yeah, they did
so
a great
7
job.
reports. Yeah. So 7 reports to Riker, and Riker wants to keep it quiet, but 7 initially disagrees.
Yeah.
But Riker has wisdom here.
Yeah, right. He's been around the galaxy, as we all know. And he's basically saying, listen, it could be anyone. Just keep it quiet for now. Do your stealth work. Keep searching. And let's let this play out. And he was right.
I know that time is precious, but do you think you could give me a moment or two with Jack?
Of course I could.
So we jump down to sickbay, and Beverly is counting the intervals between the biological energy surges that they've been experiencing when Picard walks in.
Right, and he's got to, he's more sullen than normal, and he's just like, this could be the end, and Beverly realizes, she gets it. Here's the beauty of these two characters and these two actors. They leave so much to their expression and not their dialogue. They don't overwrite it. They just keep sharing looks at each other, and we all get what they're thinking. And Picard's just like, can I just have some time with Jack? And Beverly's like, you got it. I get it. And she ducks out. And that also, great moment.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the best shows don't always rely on writing. I mean, writing sometimes are the looks that are presented. I mean, it all works together. And so they're doing a really good job of utilizing that.
Plus, these characters have 35 years together, okay? The actors have 35 years. The writers, the producers, they've all been in the soup for decades. They don't have to overwrite it. Now, I mentioned the band playing on in Titanic. To me, something's going on with Beverly. She's doing this countdown. We don't know why. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom, there's the energy surge again. But to me, that's analogous to the band playing on. She's still working. She's in sickbay. She's getting things. Everyone else is like, okay, what are we going to do? She's like, she's on to something. She's playing that violin on that deck.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll see what happens.
Don't come.
Can we talk?
Officially, no.
Unofficially?
No.
Something bigger is happening here. We have a major personnel problem, and nobody knows this ship better than you.
So we go to Shaw's quarters, and Seven visits Shaw, and Shaw's a trip. You
Oh
know,
my God, I
you
love
hear
him.
the chime on the door, and he's like, "Do not come, no, no, do not enter."
No.
He's such an ass.
Yeah,
but I like him.
Well, here's the thing. I would love to see him get his own spin-off. If anyone's listening, let's let him have his own show. He is fantastic in that role.
Yep, and I take back what I said in a previous episode of Energize that I wanted to see him get blown up. So
how dare you?
Well, I'm glad he's not dead.
His character, yes, but his acting, no, please.
He's cool. He's cool.
Yeah.
But so Seven, debriefs and tells him about the changeling on board, and Shaw realizes for the first time that the events of the past few days are bigger than his issues with Riker and Picard. But it isn't clear. It still isn't clear how they discovered the Titan.
Right. So we have to leave that there. Obviously it gets resolved, but they just keep peppering us with question marks, and I just think it's just a really great way to go. It's just a really refreshing way to write The Next Generation with all of these complex angles and so forth. They've had time to do it. They only need 10 episodes. It's wonderful.
And we're loving it. I mean, we're the beneficiaries of something really, really beautiful that, actually a lot of time and effort and thought was put into it.
Yeah.
I want to record a private message for Deanna Troi.
Recording. Proceed with message.
Deanna, I want you to know...
Recording paused.
So we go to Riker, and he's sitting alone in, I guess, one of the ready rooms, and he's struggling to record a goodbye message to Deanna.
Right. This is also, they're really giving Riker and Jonathan Frakes here a really wonderful moment or many moments of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not mea culpa, but just of a reality check. He more than anybody, I think, is looking death in the mouth or in the eyes. And he seems to be the only one kind of accepting it. And it is simply because Thaddeus and the backstory of that and losing his son. And I've never seen him so complex. And of course, Johnny Frakes also directed this episode, so I know he gave himself time to do this. But I love what they did with Riker in this episode. It's probably my favorite episode of Riker probably ever.
No, it's wonderful, and you're correct. I mean, we're seeing him as more than, I can't ever say that he was a one note during Next Generation, but he's definitely more complex in Picard, and I really do apprutting that.
Well, he has the mileage now, you know what I mean? And that's what makes him complex. In Next Generation, he was a young, tough guy, right? Putting his foot up on the console, shoot first, ask question later kind of guy. He has so much mileage now, and we see it, and he lets himself play it out. I like it.
But he cannot write this message, so he never finishes it.
And we know that's not the last time he's going to visit that too. This is the other thing they're doing here is they're not leaving things out. They always wrap things up. So we'll get back to that, obviously.
Holodeck program 10 forward activated.
Oh, would you like to have a drink with me?
I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room. The hair.
Enjoy it while you can.
So we go to Picard and Jack as they enter the holodeck. So we can just see the holodeck once again.
Yeah.
And so it's a simulation of that same bar that Picard was in when we jumped 5 years earlier. And
plus, we saw it last season too with Guinan, young Guinan. It's called 10 Forward, and he loves it for a lot of reasons. I was surprised Guinan wasn't in it, but I think it would have been a distraction maybe.
Yeah. And so Jack gives us a really good misdirect by saying he wants to discuss the elephant in the room. And you're like, okay, so we're going to talk about why he never reached out to Picard. But no, he wants to talk about why Picard is bald. And essentially, am I going to head in that same direction?
And he's like, okay, so the hair. We need to talk about it. And he's like, how old are you? He's like, what are you, about 23, 24? He's like, enjoy every moment.
Yep, enjoy it while you can.
That's what he says. Yeah, enjoy it while you can. That was so great. And I love that they did that. Which is interesting to me, too, because, 400 years into the future, they haven't perfected Rogaine. But I think maybe that's not the point. I think 300 years of evolution doesn't stop your hair from balding. And I think that one of the things I loved about Picard and what I loved about Patrick Stewart is that he just let it happen. And he's considered a sex symbol in the Star Trek community. So I'm all for it.
And good writing again, because they're not playing it by the numbers. I mean, the way they write, they don't do what you expect. So
it's not on the nose.
It's not on the nose. It's not cliche, and I appreciate that. So
me too.
Picard drives the point. He wants to know why Jack chose not to get to know him. But Jack diverts and changes the subject. Yeah. And he just goes on talking, and we move away from
drinking.
That particular scene.
Yeah. He goes, give me some cheap whiskey, and he start pouring Jameson. And I'm like, come on. That's mean. Jameson's good. It's not that cheap. I like Jameson.
All the stations that a changeling can infiltrate. Why transporter tech?
I don't know. I've never encountered one before.
They're goo people, walking, talking clay dough. They can replicate a person on sight alone. Most of the time you could tell. Ask them a question that they should know the answer to. Some question, wrong answer. Boom, changeling.
All right, so we go back to Shaw and Seven, and they're trying to figure out the best way to catch this changeling.
Right, and Shaw suggests, listen, and I think this is brilliant. Ask them a question that they should know the answer to. And if they don't, then you'll know. Now, I would have thought of that maybe or maybe not. It's very obvious. But for some reason, I was very impressed with the way he stepped up. So much so that I started to think, well, wait, is he the changeling? I was like, what's going on? Or is Seven the changeling now? Is the changeling Seven? So there's going to be a twist where it's like, you shouldn't have told me that, right? That kind of thing. But it still was great.
Well, he can't be. He already broke his leg and blew
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, so we know he's real. He's real.
But he proves it. He proves it by saying, listen, I underestimated you. You're a natural leader. You're going to be captain someday. And he goes, now, was that bullshit? And she's like, oh, yeah, it was, because you're a dick. And he's like, exactly, thanks.
Yeah, but deep down that he was speaking truth. Of Seven,
I guess, yeah, but he wouldn't say that to her, and that's how he was proving. He was proving to her how she would know. Such a good scene.
Yeah, it was really, really good. Again, great writing. And Shaw says the best way to catch a changeling is to find the pot that they rest in, because that's what they do.
She's like, "Are you talking about cannabis?" Which was another really funny line out of nowhere.
Yeah, it was really good. So Shaw suggests, going and finding that pot.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what she does. She goes to the quarters and she finds the hidden pot, and it has his residue in it. So if you find the residue, then you're able to
match it DNA wise or whatever and find
DNA wise and tune your scanners to it and then you're able to, at least in theory, be able to locate them.
That's the theory, right? We always have our theories and our motivations. Doesn't always happen that way, but we try.
Unfortunately, the starship-faring Jack Crusher couldn't escape the center of the gravity well. That's not possible with my ship's payload. The portal device utilizes gravimetric distortion.
And so briefly we go to the Shrike, and this was kind of weird.
Yeah, this one kind of threw me. So Vadic is there kind of on her own, and she takes out this knife and cuts her hand. And first, I don't know what's going on. She's doing it over this pool of something, and she puts her hand down, and it kind of morphs into this really interesting, like, skull head with blood around it, and it starts speaking to her, and it tells her to go back to the nebula and go after Jack. Like, why? And this interesting thing about this scene, Anthony, is, first of all, remember what I told you. She's not the one. She's a hired gun. She's working for somebody. Remember that?
Yep, you were correct.
I was right. She's a hired gun, and here we prove it right there. This person's telling her, and all of a sudden she goes from this tormenting evil genius to just a tool in somebody else's game. And she's suddenly vulnerable, and she's scared, and she's like, I don't know, and all right, and yes, I'll do it. I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And so this, whatever, is it a changeling? Is it something else? Tells her to go back into the nebula and get Jack. So once again, I mean, we've played this back and forth.
Yeah.
Because Beverly said in the previous episode that maybe it wasn't about Jack. It was about through Jack we're trying to get Picard. But now this person's saying go back into the nebula and get Jack.
Well, I was your age, or thereabouts, and dare I say, perhaps even a little reckless.
All right, so we jump back to 5 years earlier,
Right.
back at the bar, and Picard is still talking to the cadets. And a young officer is asking about the situation that Picard and Elder Jack Crusher got into.
Jack won.
The famous story where they used these techniques when their shuttle was damaged to miraculously escape doom.
Yeah.
To be rescued.
I think he said it was 10 fucking hours or something. He used fucking, which was great. I love that Picard throws out an F-bomb now and then. Let me ask you this. I was really versed in TNG, and I know Jack Crusher was all over that series. And one of my favorite things ever is when somebody talks about someone that we never see, like someone that's dead. I love that. That's a great technique. Was that story ever told in TNG? I don't remember it.
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I just always heard the story of how he died, to my recollection. And that the two were best friends and kind of rowdy. I did get that.
And we could do a whole prequel on that. Picard and Jack Crusher just doing their I mean, I think Star Trek is rife with opportunity here.
Oh yeah, opposite. Exactly. I mean, I really do think there's a lot of open space to run.
Yep.
Excuse me. Sir, is this private?
No. Please, come in.
Come on.
So we jump back to the present, and we're back at the holodeck.
So now, because of systems shutting down and people actually afraid, some young officers start to walk in and they're like, is it okay if we come in? And it's like, yeah, man, it's fine. Everyone's welcome. They sit down and they know they're going to die. They're kind of hugging each other. Jack's watching this whole thing. And
yeah, it's like awake.
Yeah. And he's like, he doesn't need this moment. I don't need to connect with people. I've always been on my own. I don't get this. This is uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, but the deal is, though, Picard insists that everyone needs a connection. He points out, and you look at, like you said, everyone is comforting each other. Even the Vulcan is comforting.
I know. I thought that was interesting. Vulcan's like, shit, I'm going to die.
Let me connect with the little bit of emotion that I have buried deep down.
It's highly logical that I hug you.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's a good moment there because Jack's like, I don't need this, and Picard, and I kind of saw this coming too. Picard's softening, especially with his son, just like Riker told him to. And he's like, maybe I do. I need this.
3, 2.
So we jump back to sickbay, and Beverly's still monitoring the biological surges coming from the nebula.
The band is playing on. The band is playing on.
Now, I will say at this point, I'm thinking there's got to be a way of tapping into the energy. That was, my thought at that point. I said, okay, these waves are coming. Maybe we can, stick some, jumper cables onto it. And,
well, you're not far
fix
off.
the ship.
I wasn't there yet. I knew there was something about it that was going on, but my first instinct was, don't fight the gravity well, go into it. Like, the only way out is in. But that was my theory. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but the good thing is both of us were thinking. I think everybody at that point was like, okay, we have to utilize those waves in some way.
Right.
So I think everybody was on the right
yeah,
track.
nothing by accident in the writing in this show, for sure. Nothing ever is by accident.
Yeah, nothing's ever wasted. If you put it out there, it's going to be answered.
Hanson to biochemistry lab. I have a substance I need scanned immediately.
Biochemistry lab has been shut down to conserve power. May I suggest you use your tricorder?
This needs more than a tricorder. Open it up. This is an emergency.
So we meet back up with Seven. She's walking down the corridor. She's got her
little pot.
She's got the changeling resting pot.
Yep.
And just she's coming down the hallway. All of a sudden, the changeling is there, looking like a different officer.
He's a badass, this guy.
He's a badass, yeah. He pulls out a phaser, kills one of the other crew members, turns around, shoots the pot,
right,
and incinerates it, and then Seven shoots him, and then he turns gelatinous.
Yeah, he's
gelatinous self.
Yes, well, he kind of gets him in the arm, right, and he's just like, I don't know, this is a day player actor, never seen him before, but the look on his face and the expression and just the angular look of his face, I'm like, wow, that guy's really mean looking, and I loved it. He's like, wow, how dare you shoot me? He didn't say a word, of course. Yeah, and then he just kind of escapes through the vent, and I'm wondering, can Seven shoot that? But I mean, how do you shoot Jello?
Oh yeah, I mean you could, but you can't shoot the wall.
Yeah,
because you probably have some kind of vital,
some conduit.
Conduit.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this dude is still a threat, or it is still a threat.
Now, come on. You must have heard about the Battle of Wolf 359. 40 Federation starships up against one Borg cube. 50 of us made it down to the life deck. But there's just one life pod. 10 seats.
So we go back to the bar, and this was a great scene. And just crazy.
Yeah.
I really, really loved it. So, Picard is still talking about his shenanigans with Jack Crusher, the senior Jack Crusher, to the younger Jack Crusher.
Right.
And he's talking about the techniques he used to escape, and then Shaw walks in.
This is such, oh God. One of the things I love about Trek is there's so much canon to play with, so much history. I didn't see this coming. I knew Shaw was a jerk. He didn't care about Riker and Picard because they were relics. But he sits down and he goes, wow, great stories. Anybody ever hear the story of Wolf 359? And I'm like, oh my, of course, everyone who's a Trek fan knows that the Battle of Wolf 359, which, by the way, I think should be a movie. I'm just putting that out there, too. I always thought that should be a movie. And the Battle of Kittimer should be a movie. Okay, moving on. We know that's the Borg. That's when, Locutus was attacking his own Federation.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great episodes, one of the great episodes of TNG. And so many people were affected by that because Sisko was affected by that.
It's the first episode of Deep Space Nine. He's like, I hate you. All these people just hate Picard. And, with Deep Space Nine, I watched the pilot. I never really watched the show too much, but you do get you get throughout this time of Star Trek that Picard's a legend, yeah, but a lot of people hate him because he was Locutus, and they keep bringing that back up, and he keeps meeting people that he hurt, and I think that's the greatest way to keep a Picard story going. Your past is not prologue, man. It's now.
Do you know where your old man was on that day? He was on that Borg cube, setting the world on fire! Forget about all that weird shit on the Stargazer. The real Borg are still out there, and they have a name for you. Locutus of Borg. The only Borg so deadly
They gave him a goddamn name.
All right, that's enough.
And so Shaw really just,
great story.
twists the knife. So he tells the story of how he lived. And so the ship that he was on, their ship was, crippled. There's 50 of them, and then they get to a spot where I guess they had a ship or escape pod that only had 10 seats left. And a senior officer comes down and just starts randomly picking people, and he was the 10th person picked.
And when he says, he points, you, and then he points at himself, this actor, the second he points to himself, I saw something shift in his eyes, like a guilt, survivor guilt. This is what he was telling me, that not, and he goes on to say 11,000 dead in that battle, right? This is not as much outrage about the battle as it is, I survived. Survival guilt is a real thing. You see it immediately. That's what's going on with him, is that survival guilt. And I loved that. I just loved it.
Yep, and he, he's vicious.
Yeah.
And he looks at Picard and he insults Picard, and it's because of you,
Locutus of Borg.
And that's when Jack steps in and it's like, that is enough. And I think that's the moment when he became Picard's son.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it's compassion. Even though, I think he we know that he chose not to be with Picard. It was his choice not to be his son. He had a chance to reach out, and as far as we know, he didn't. So Picard's like, no, it's okay. And again, this is another great piece. Picard's like, I'm used to it, man. I get it. I was Locutus. I killed 11,000 people. I'm just gonna take my lumps and walk away. I get it.
Yeah, it's his cross to bear. It's his cross to bear.
Yes. Everyone's looking at Shaw. They're like, dude, get some decaf. And Shaw's just like, look, I'm sorry. Somehow asshole became a substitute for charm, which was a very prescient moment for him, for his character. This guy we barely know. I feel like I know him very well.
Yep. And I have to give it to you. You alluded to this. In the first episode, in the second episode when we first met Shaw, that maybe Shaw had interacted with Picard as Locutus. So you win. Yeah, you win on that one.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, my instincts. I get it. I should write for Star Trek.
So you got that one. It was good. It was good foresight, and so it paid off, and it did happen.
You don't need to explain yourself to me.
Thank you for your time, Jack. It meant a lot to me.
Jack, Sean Luc, there's a pattern. It's building and building, and it's going to crescendo.
What are you talking about?
This gravity well we're in. It's drawing in matter and expelling energy, which means somewhere in its center, it is reconstituting the matter it consumes into energy.
So in the hallway, Jack chases down Picard, and Jack tells him, and I thought this was another really cool thing on his part. He said, listen, you don't have to explain yourself to me,
Right.
And I think that was showing respect.
I thought that was nice too, and because Jack, he chose not to be with Picard for whatever reason, but he also knows who Picard is and was, and he says you don't have to explain yourself, and there's some depth there, and then they're met in the corridor, by Beverly, and suddenly the family's there, but Beverly's got news.
Yep. She informs them that the biological energy waves implies a countdown, which harkens to contractions. And remember, earlier, the biological, I was always saying we're inside.
Yes.
Remember I said,
yes, you were.
Is this something like in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back? Are we inside something? And it seems like the answer to that question is yes.
Yeah, and again, back to my original theory, which was wrong, I think, was, maybe they go in. But nonetheless, yeah, you were right about that. And Beverly counting them down, the band is playing on while the Titanic's sinking, and she's got something. And then Jack steps in and he's like, listen, I got an idea.
We have no power.
We do when those waves hit. You seen the lights? If we knew when those waves were coming, maybe we could plug into them. Get a little extra juice, and then
we could hitch a ride out of here.
And so the way they worked that out was incredible. So they get Riker involved in the plan, right? And the plan is, look, and I love this because I love when they explain technology in Star Trek. I've always been a fan of that. That's why I love Geordi so much, because he was the one always explaining the technology of it. And they said, look, this ship has been retrofitted, but not the nacelles. They're still kind of old school. We can open up the sides of these nacelles and harness this energy, just like you predicted, actually. And we can, if we could harness the lightning and flow it into the flux capacitor. You know what I mean?
Great analogy.
Yes,
Great
exactly.
analogy. It's exactly what the
It's
deal
exactly
is.
what the deal is.
Yep.
Marty has to get it up to 88 with the hook, and we'll hit the thing when the lightning hits, and it'll send us back to 1985, and that was the plan. And Riker at first is like, no, and I'm like, why? This was confusing to me.
Yeah, it was a little confusing because Riker, you're hesitant. You're being hesitant like you were before, and it seems like Riker just wants to die with dignity.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it was. Like, hey, man, I've accepted my death.
Yep. But Beverly reminds him and just like, listen, dude, if Deanna was here, she would say this would be about trust. Yeah, I'm on team. Keep fighting until your last breath.
Me too. I'm on team flux capacitor, but again, there's something about Riker, and we've seen some stuff about this season of Picard and what they're doing, and I've seen a lot of interviews with Patrick Stewart, and he's always said, hey man, it's been 20, 25 years. These people have changed.
Yeah, but then Riker gets on board. He quickly realizes there's a way to get all that hooked up, and everybody's off.
We're going to use these energy waves to jumpstart us. I'm not going to lie, it's a hell of a risk. Anything goes wrong, anything goes wrong, we'll all know pretty quick.
So then Riker gives this inspiring speech to the crew, tells them this is it.
Yep, gets them rallied.
Yep, and let's get it done.
Captain Shaw, I realize that I'm the last person you want to see right now, but I need your help, despite the fact that you are indeed a dipshit from Chicago.
Then we go back to Shaw's quarters, and Picard and Seven drop by, and they get him pumped up and say, hey, listen, we got these old ass nacelles, and you're you're an old ass dipshit from Chicago.
Right, from Chicago, which is what he said. Hey, what do I know? I'm a dipshit from Chicago. He said that in the bar. And it was so cute the way he threw it back.
Yeah, it was really neat. And so Shaw gets on board and he says, all right, cool. This old grease monkey will get into action. So it's really great.
Yeah.
So we get down to nacelle control. Seven and Shaw are working on it. And and Shaw brings up a point. He says, hey, if you're a changeling, this would be the time to sabotage. Sabotage it.
That changeling really wanted to screw us. Best place to do it, Bag, would be right here, right now.
Yeah, he's kind of our meta guy. He's the outsider who shows all of our fans what Star Trek is. He reminds us of Locutus. He reminds us that Picard and Riker are relics. He reminds us that, hey, here's a good plot point. He's kind of our meta voice. I thought immediately that Seven would go, yeah, you're right, and then shoot Shaw, because I was like, oh, maybe this is it. But that doesn't happen, luckily, at least not there.
Yeah, and then Seven quickly radios to Riker.
Yeah, and she's like, Commander, and or Captain, I should say. And he's like, understood. Like, they didn't have to tell each other. They know what's going on. And they now need to just get more power. They got to get to 100% thruster power. So that means shutting down life support.
Yep. And so, so basically what happened was they had to navigate through the asteroid field that, took a lot of the remaining power. So the last bit of power they had was life support. So Riker makes that decision, and he tells everybody, hold your breath. And so this is all or nothing. So everybody put their last bit of chips on the table, and this is it. So we go back down to nacelle control, and who shows up? It's Ensign LaForge.
There's some confusion here. I was sent to help, Commander.
I specifically told Captain Riker not to send anyone.
Commander, it's me.
Commander what, Forge?
Commander Hansen.
First of all, Seven says, I'll be right back, which I think is like, that means Seven's going to come back as the changeling. But no, Ensign LaForge shows up, and she's like, I'm here to help. And he's like, I didn't ask for help. I told everybody to stay there.
She's like a valley girl. Duh, my dad is, Joy to the Forge. I know all about engineering. Yeah.
Yeah, and she asks a question. She's like, so you can't do this with just one nacelle, right? And I'm like, oh, man.
It's a changeling.
Oh,
it's
my
a changeling.
God. She's a changeling. Yeah, and then suddenly, and brilliantly, there's this phaser right to her head. And it's Seven, who did not leave. She was waiting for the changeling to show up.
Yep.
And she's like, Commander, what are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, my God, my dad.
Yeah. She said, what are you doing, Commander? And then she's like, Commander.
Yeah.
Commander what?
Commander what? Now, last episode, last episode, she came to show support. Now, they wrote that on purpose. And they said, thank you, Commander 7. Right?
Yes.
Because she's like, I'm with you. And she's like, Commander what? And she's like, Commander Hansen. I'm like, oh, okay. Boop. Bye-bye.
She shoots her immediately. Yeah.
Right. Bitch.
And so Shaw's like, basically, how did you know? And it was like, she calls me Commander 7 out of respect.
Out of respect.
It was kind of a jab at him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
To that grease monkey from Chicago.
There you go.
So now the changeling is gone, and we're glad for that.
Yep.
Open for business.
Second nacelle is open.
Contact. 7,000 kilometers, bearing 224 Mark 5.
Helm, aft thrusters 15 degrees down.
Aft thrusters.
Shut it off on my mark.
Aye, sir.
So now it's time for the Great Escape, and the Picard asks Jack to help him at the helm because they've been navigating through the asteroids. The wave hits a Titan, and everything works. They're shooting through.
Well, yeah. Well, it was brilliant too, because when the nacelles open, I thought that was neat. By the way, the graphics this season are unparalleled. It happens in a couple of interesting sequences because, like you said, they have to navigate the asteroids, which reminded me of the 1980s asteroid thing, like boom, 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 boom. You got to shoot the asteroids; they're flowing all over the place. But this was obviously a high-tech 2023 version. But yeah, when that wave hits, man, it's. They're like, you have to ride this thing. It was great.
Sirs, contact the Shrike. Mark 019, dead ahead.
Is our tractor beam operational?
Aye, sir.
Then lock onto those coordinates.
Because of the energy that's coming into the ship, everything comes back online. Everything's looking great. And then all of a sudden, guess who's in front? It's the Shrike is right in front of them. And then Riker pulls a brilliant move.
He basically does to the Shrike what the Shrike did to the Titan. He grabs something big with the tractor beam and he slingshots it. Which, by the way, that's the second time they've done that this season. But the first time they've ever done anything like that, as far as I know, in Star Trek, and it's one of the sexiest things I've ever seen. Grab something with your tractor beam and whip it at a ship. I thought that was just incredible.
Exactly, because shields mean nothing up against mass.
Right.
Shields are for energy.
Right, exactly, because it dissipates.
Exactly,
it dissipates the phaser beam. Exactly right. This one, it's like, no, it's going to hit you.
Yep. And so then the Shrike is disabled. And then all of a sudden we see the Nebula's offspring floating around. They were inside a womb.
Yeah, it gave birth.
It gave birth.
Which, again, this is more pure Star Trek. This is more Gene Roddenberry, Mission at Farpoint Star Trek. Where, hey, an alien life form has been born. And I think it was maybe Beverly who said, we're seeking out new life. And then Riker's like, well, let's boldly get out of here.
Yeah, but Riker's inspired. I mean,
so
it was a great moment.
Yeah.
But here comes the twist. Here comes the twist.
Excuse me, Admiral. You went on and on about your crew. Your life in Starfleet. Did you have a life outside of that? What about a real family?
Picard is standing there. And everybody's in awe and wonder. He's looking at Jack, and then we flash back. We flash back to the bar 5 years earlier. And once again, like you say, no moment is wasted.
The kids are still there.
Yeah, the young cadets are still there. And somebody interrupts him.
And he's like, what about family? You talk a lot about your story. I'm trying to do a British accent. I'm terrible. What about family, right? You've told a lot of cool stories. A la Shaw said that too, by the way. Shaw's like, oh, great stories, but what about this? Someone else says, hey, what about family? Did you, was that ever important to you? And Picard says in a really almost defiant way. No, I never had use for that. And it's very cold in a way.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't take it as cold. I mean, he's in the moment. He's already inspired these kids about leaning on your fellow Starfleet members. You always have hope. You know, you can get through a situation. And I think that he was just saying that, you know, Starfleet's the only family that I've ever needed, is basically what he said.
Right.
And
Which if he knew, okay, so let's break it down. So if he knew that was his son asking,
he would never said that.
That wouldn't have been his answer.
Of course not.
Right. But the miscommunication here and the fact that Jack didn't say, "Hi, I'm your son," dictated to him, "Okay, you're nothing to him. Go live your life."
Yep.
The only thing that I was confused about was that it was only 5 years ago. If it was 10 or 15 years ago, then I could see why Jack wouldn't want to reach out to him. So that would mean that Beverly only told Jack that Picard was his father 5 years ago.
Right, like when he turned 18, like what you would do when,
okay.
think about it.
Right, because he's 23, 24. Right. All right, that makes sense. Yeah.
So Picard realizes in that moment that he turned his own son off when he made that statement. And I thought that was beautiful. It was a good way to swing it all back around. And I'm trying to... and Jack's looking back at him.
Maybe not remembering the same moment, but in his own mind saying, we're linked now. We've gone through something together, like a father and son. And look, if you read the book Iron John by Robert Bly, there you go. Facing death with father and son is what brings a man into true manhood. And in my opinion, that's that mythology that happened in this very episode. We faced death together, and now we're linked.
I know I thought being away was going to be the answer to all of our problems. But after what we've just been through...
I'm just glad that everyone's okay. That you're okay.
So everybody's happy. We're safe. We're on to the next part of the story. And we come to Riker, and he's speaking with Deanna, and I guess they're making amends. And he feels rejuvenated by what he witnessed, the new life form giving birth, this new, life in space.
We get one more twist.
Jack.
Jack is at the sink. Now, here's what happens. He's at the sink and he splashes water in his face. He looks up, and behind him on the wall, these evil red vines start growing out. Now, to me, that was Picard's moment in First Contact in the beginning, where he's at the sink, splashes water on his face.
Nice connection.
Yeah, looks at his face, and the vines come out of his face. Now, here's my theory. Because Jack goes into some kind of hellscape when he sees something. We don't know why. But my theory is that Picard had some kind of Borg technology left over and may have passed this on to Jack. If that's the case, Jack has some kind of Borg something in him, and that may be why they're trying to pursue him.
Yeah, it makes him valuable because he's a hybrid of some sort.
Yeah, like the Cylons. The Cylons could reproduce themselves. And here's why I think that. Because again, we bring up Locutus. We have Shaw bringing up Locutus. They wouldn't have brought that up. I no wasted moments. I think this is all going to be connected. And one of the criticisms I had of the very first season of Picard was that they made him an android, which I'll never get over or forgive the writers for doing that. I think they should have brought back more Borg stuff. Like, maybe he has to have an implant put back in because he's incomplete or something. And I remember tweeting that, and someone wrote back, "Oh, the Borg story's already over. They told that already. They need to do new things." Well, looks like I was right, because I don't think they're giving up this Borg thing.
No, it's a great thing to bring it back because it's a rich story, and it's way more complex. And
without a doubt.
Yeah. So it's really, really good. But while we saw all these flashes, I could have sworn I saw the Los Angeles skyline blow up. And we see a door open with red lights coming out. And someone's talking to him too.
Find her, is it?
Yeah.
Find
something
me.
Like
Find
that.
me.
Yeah, find me. That's what it was. Is that the Borg Queen? I don't know.
Maybe. I'm telling you, man. It's Borg.
Another great episode. Just a lot of great layers. And so I saw a tweet from the executive producer, Metalis, and he basically said that this is the end of Act 1 of the story.
Yeah, and it seems like that because they get out of the nebula and they've kind of evaded the Shrike for now. That's one complete Act 1 story. Yeah. So Act 2 is obviously going to be different. And then Act 3 is going to be balls to the wall, explosive, incredible. They are not going to let us down. I guarantee it.
So Steve, every good show hinges on the performances of each member of the cast.
I agree. And this episode, was so rich with them. And there was also some great moments. So here are this week's best performances and moments within Star Trek Picard.
Did your old man ever tell you about the time that he and I first met? The Battle of Wolf 359.
He was on that Borg cube, setting the world on fire!
All right, that's enough.
No.
So Steve, my number one performance, the best performance in the show, I have to give to Shaw. I love his moment in the holodeck when he was facing off with Picard, when he recalled the story of his experience at Wolf 359. And it was just, it was raw. It was deep. You got a chance to get a piece of Shaw and understand where he was coming from and the sense of loss and why he felt, why he's angry at Picard. And now you understand why he's so flipped to these guys.
I couldn't agree more. I think that I agree with you. It just was a banner performance, and Shaw's presence in this season has been, he's just stealing every scene and just making the show just so much better.
The cell 1 is open. One more to go.
My favorite performance was actually that of the CGI crew. I loved everything about this episode, and I agree about Shaw, but I just love the visuals that they're putting in. The nacelles opening up, the beautiful close-up shots of just outside the bridge on top of the saucer section of the Titan. Every little aspect of this ship, we're right on top of it. It's flinging the asteroid. To me, the standout performance was the graphics. I just can't get enough of it, and they delight us so much, especially in HD.
That concludes this episode of the Star Trek Picard edition of Energize.
For more information, go to www.energizepodcasts.com. And if you want to sign up for a preview of my new book, The Deletion, Book 1 of the Mindset Chronicles, go to stevetruitt.com.
Thanks for listening. I'm Anthony McLemore.
I'm Steve Truitt. Live long and prosper.